This story takes place 4 years ago and still haunts me to this day. It was Christmas night, and my family was driving home from this fancy restaurant. I, unlike my family, wasn't tired, so the 45-minute drive seemed perpetual. On top of that, my little sister was constantly moaning about how her friend didn't get her anything for Christmas. Family drives like this are burned into everybody's memories. Just staring out the window, listening to some droning butt rock or classic stuff, hearing your siblings complain or talk shit, and having to smell their stinky breath the whole ride. It's like a bus ride for prisoners or something. It's involuntary, vaguely abusive, and overly angsty in our heads. After about 20 minutes of driving, my dad stopped at a gas station to get some cigarettes, and my sister, brother, and mother all got out to pee. I stayed in the car because I'd already gone before we left. It was also going to be the only moment of solitude that I'd have for the rest of the trip. No chit-chat, no shitty music, no crunching on car snacks. Once they all left, I decided to play a few games on my phone. Not a real big win in the way of time spent, but I took what I could get. I looked at the car clock and saw that 10 minutes had passed, so I immediately wondered what was taking them all so long. As soon as I peered out of the car window, I saw a man staring at our car. He was a ways off, pretty much across the lot, but there was no mistaking it. All of his energy was focused right on my window. The man startled me, as I didn't know how long he'd been watching. What made it even more unnerving is that it felt like he had a plain blank face. No expression was shown at all. It was hard to make out any features because it was pretty dark, and he wasn't standing in any illuminated part of the station. He was about 5'9" and looked to be middle-aged. Once he saw me notice him, he starts walking toward the car. I'd be lying to you if I said I wasn't scared. Luckily, my dad came back with the rest of the family, just as the man took a couple of steps. My dad apologized, told me he'd been in an argument with the cashier. I didn't care, I was just glad that my dad was back with me. I took another glance at the man outside. He was still staring, but this time, he had this annoyed look on his face. We drove off, and for the rest of that car ride, I couldn't stop thinking about that man. This wouldn't have been too bad if it had ended there, but it didn't. Later that night, I was watching YouTube while everyone else was sleeping, and luckily for me, a storm was raging over us. I enjoy storms. It makes me cozy as I'm lying in bed. I put my phone down and just enjoyed the ambience. This didn't last for long. I heard something smash into the window behind me. I lurched forward and nearly fell out of my bed. I thought a bird had just smashed into the window. I parted the blinds, and what I saw next haunted me. I saw a man standing out in my parents' cars, looking up at my room. As I took a closer look, I nearly had a heart attack. It was that same man I saw at the gas station. Only this time, when our eyes met, he grinned. Being the 14-year-old that I was, I did the manly thing and screamed at the top of my lungs. My dad came running down the stairs and entered my room. "Why the hell are you screaming?" he said. I told him about the man, and I explained everything that had taken place earlier. My dad grabbed a baseball bat and told me to call the police. After 10 minutes, the police turned up outside our house, and they ended up finding the man inside our shed. He got arrested, and that was the last time I saw him. The next day, my dad inspected the house, and we found that the handle of our back door had been damaged, but not completely broken. This just gives me an eerie feeling, as if he actually managed to get inside. Could have harmed us, or possibly killed us. It was Christmas Eve and I was a freshman in high school. My family has been split up for some time now, and we normally trade off Christmas Day and Christmas Eve every year. This year, I'd come home early from my grandparents' Christmas party, while everyone else was at my aunt and uncle's celebrating another party. I think this scattered type of celebration is more common than we think, especially in America. Lots of families are divorced, so they don't spend every holiday in the same house, but divvy them up like bookies in a gambling hall. You have to make a case for the holidays you want, and also for those planning on skipping. It's hectic, but it's what we call normal. When I was dropped off, my cousins offered to stay with me for a few hours, but I declined. I thought I could watch some of my new DVDs and get some alone time in the house, which is a rarity, especially during the holidays. Again, we're normally crammed into a single car, or navigating a house full of aunts and uncles we don't normally see. I was actually super excited to get a little me time. I had noticed an unfamiliar car parked out on the street, but didn't think anything of it considering it was Christmas Eve. Probably a neighbor's relative or something like that. After I got inside, I locked the door, grabbed some snacks, and started to settle in. I hadn't been home for more than 15 minutes when there was a knock at the door. This unsettled me to my core. Anyone that was supposed to be coming back to this house definitely had their own key. All of them. The notion of someone knocking implied they didn't live here. It's hard to explain what I'm trying to get at, but I immediately knew this person was probably bad. I remembered that lone car, sitting out on the street. I got up anyway and went to the door. Maybe it was my grandma and her arms were full of leftovers. Something innocent and totally normal. It's funny how that happens when we're young. The older, reasonable voice in our head will scream every kind of red flag and warning, only for the smaller, more familiar voice to override and say, "No, why don't you just go take a look, just in case?" I went to the door but just stood there for a minute and waited. If it was someone in the family, they would either knock again and holler or slide the key into the deadbolt. Neither of those things were happening. Instead, I hear another simple 3-part knock. The most disarming thing around. I unlocked the door and opened it only a crack to see a man standing there. Dark hair, glasses, slightly overweight, and dressed casually. He didn't look like much of a threat, but my stomach dropped. This definitely wasn't my grandma. This was a stranger, someone I'd never seen before. I couldn't imagine what the hell would bring him to my doorstep on Christmas night. He asked me, "Hey, I was wondering about the car outside. Is it for sale?" He had a weird, higher-pitched voice. I told him I don't think so. "Is there someone here I can talk to about it?" I said without much thought, "No, you can come back at a later time, though." I shut the door and turned the lock as fast as I possibly could. He immediately reached for the handle and then started pounding on the door. I heard a string of profanity and the pounding then stopped. Now terrified, I was crawling on the floor to the phone, hoping he wouldn't be able to see me through one of our windows. Then I heard some other noises. Our house had this open garage door, and it led through to the laundry room, where the door lock was broken, and no one had bothered to fix it. There was some kind of crazy thrashing sound happening between the front door and the garage entrance. I thought for a second there were two of them, and then the guy at the door just distracted me. Now the second guy was about to smash through the garage entrance and murder me before anyone could get home. Just then I heard a man yell, and I saw the man through the window run back to his car and drive off. That aggressive thrashing that I'd heard was my uncle. He'd parked down the road and walked up to the house. As he got on the property along the far side, he saw that guy standing at the door. My uncle slipped into the open garage, found a baseball bat, and then just came out charging. He intercepted the guy just in time and scared him off. Who knows what would have happened if he hadn't made it home in time. Sadly and unfortunately, neither of us got a plate number, and nothing really ever came of it. But I'll never be home alone on any holiday ever again. Just to give a little background information, I grew up in the deep rural South, where almost all of labor was seasonal. There was always many Hispanic families blowing through the town during the seasons, usually harvesting related. They would get to town and fill absolutely every rental and open every property in town. The economy would literally boom for 3 months straight, maybe even 4. Then the cycle would shift once again. These families would pass through generally 2 or 3 times a year before the winter hit, and then they all moved on. The harvesting and agricultural work dried up with the winter change, and so did our buzzing little economy. So around Christmas time in the late 80s and early 90s, me, my cousins, and all my friends are having a sleepover at one of my friends' house during one of our rare snowstorms. This particular friend's dad was ex-military, had a pretty cool collection of surplus gear, namely a pair of night vision goggles. This was one of the reasons we like to conglomerate at his house. There's just always cool shit to play with. As I explained before, this is the deep south in the middle of winter, so as you can imagine, there's even less to do than normal, especially for a bunch of kids that can't even drive. We went and manned the windows so one could look out at the snowfall. I think we were playing something akin to Army Base, so we were pretending to be scouts or lookouts and would call for an approaching enemy. Then someone would hand the goggles over to us. It was a fun way to share the coolest toy we were allowed to play with, and also keep us entertained. It felt like we were on a special mission, and every movement counted. Also, the snow and surrounding woodland looked unbelievable, way cooler than it does in the movies. You can literally see everything in motion. That's when we noticed something strange. Consistent movement coming from the nearest neighboring house. Now, this house had been abandoned for a couple of months at the time, as we all knew the family that had moved. We don't know exactly what happened, but suddenly they were getting out of town ASAP. Probably something to do with the wishy-washy economy. Either way, even the kids of the family that went to school just disappeared one day, and that was that. No one ever moved in. No for sale sign, just a big, empty, kind of creepy house in the corner. This house, in the moment, doesn't appear abandoned. Faintly, and only with the help of the night vision goggles, we could see a light on in the attic. It almost appeared to be wavering or dying, maybe turning on and off. There's just something inconsistent about how it reads through the goggles. We took turns passing them around, trying to guess what we were all seeing. So as a group of teenagers tend to do, we decided we need to investigate. We went to the mudroom and started layering up on our warmest clothes for the mission at hand. Flannels, denims, coats, and then an outer shell. Black gloves and beanies came last to keep us hidden in the dark. We felt like this little paramilitary unit. Although the truth is, if anything decided to kill us, there wouldn't have been shit we could do to stop it. We were barely 12 years old at the time. We navigated the woodland rather than use the road. This made us feel even cooler. Kept us out of sight of any potential watchmen. I think we all believed there was going to be an enemy, or a great mystery, so we decided we needed to sneak up on it. Sure enough, we step onto the property and there's definitely a light on the attic. It's a candle, flickering back and forth beyond the single slat window that we can see through. The wavering of the flame was what made it inconsistent through the NVGs. If it blew too hard, it almost looked like it went out. We stood there in the cold and just stared. Clearly there was someone inside of this abandoned house. Someone who probably shouldn't be in there. There wasn't a chance of any of us getting any closer to the house to actually look around. We knew the porch to be creaky, would give away our position. We slunk back into the tree line and just watched for a bit. Chased what the slender shadows we could see moving around in the attic up there. After a while, the chill got us. We retreated back to the house, where we continued to monitor with the night vision goggles until we had to go to bed. We agreed we'd investigate for real when the sun was up. The next morning, we all trekked back over to the house and, not seeing any more light from the attic, made our way inside. This was easier than it should have been, but as mentioned, we knew that kid used to live there. He showed us the loose windows and doors that failed to latch. We slipped in without much noise and closed everything behind us and then waited. We wanted to make sure no one saw us come in. After a few minutes of silence, we began to look around. As expected, the house was completely cleared out. No furniture, no decor, nothing. There were stains on the walls from where the pictures had been hanging. The drawers and cupboards were totally empty. There wasn't any evidence of a squatter, vagrant, or serial killer. There was only one place left to look. Now, this could have been just us teenagers having an overactive imagination, but I swear that when we pulled open the trapdoor to the attic, a cold wind rushed past us. Everyone from the front of the line to the back felt it, which is why I still don't deny that it happened. This wasn't the most unbelievable part though. As we climbed up into that attic, we noticed it was just as barren as the rest of the house, save for the one central feature. There, in the middle of the attic, was a bloody sacrificed lamb nailed to a crucifix. Those of us in the lead that actually got into the attic had a full meltdown, screaming, backpedaling, trying to get away from the carnage. The smell was horrendous, and there at the foot of the crucifix were a pair of burnt out candles. We ran back down the ladder, then down the hall, and barreled through any manner of exit that we saw fit. No one bothered to close anything behind them. After that, we made a tear through the thicket and back to our friend's house. We went straight to his dad and told him. This is the same military dad with all the badass equipment. We were actually elated it was him that we got to tell. No one was more prepared than the guy with the machine guns and night vision goggles. He didn't really have the reaction that we wanted though. He laughed and told us to just carry on. It was only after 20 minutes of breathless pleading did he actually start to listen. We went over it as detailed as possible, from last night until now, of exactly what we'd seen. Our friend's dad tucked a pistol into his waistband and then wandered over to the property. He poked around for a minute before he came hustling back and called the police. There's a big story, a big report, and it never went anywhere. Like I said at the beginning, because of the nature of the town we lived in, there was always weird people rolling through, which meant weird shit was always happening. In the South, we also had the misfortune of having our law enforcement caught up with the tail end of the satanic panic, so they didn't really have the urge to get to the bottom of it. My cousin says he thinks maybe it had something to do with the weird sect of Catholicism or something. But the scariest part to us is that we almost went into the house during whatever ritual was taking place. It could have been us nailed to that crucifix. I'm not a writer, so please forgive any errors that may not flow as well as I would like to. I'm doing the best I can. A little background first, this happened about 4 years ago. At the time, I was around 8 months pregnant, so very noticeable. I was doing some Christmas shopping at the local mall. It was around 9 at night. I finished up my shopping and headed out the mall towards my truck. At this mall, there's a road that goes all around the mall, and the parking is on the other side of this road. Therefore, you have to cross the road to get to the parking area. As I'm leaving the store, I happened to notice a man standing in the middle of the road. He looked in my direction and made eye contact. I looked away and kept going. At the same time, there are two men that walked past him to go into the mall. He never looked at them or said anything to them. He just kept his eyes on me. I noticed that he started to walk in my direction now, and just keep strolling to my vehicle. I then hear, "Excuse me, can you help me?" Being Southern has its downfalls, and one of those is having it ingrained in you to be polite. I just simply asked, "What do you need?" He looked around and said, "Can you help me start my car? I think my battery's dead." I may be Southern, but I'm not that polite, nor am I stupid. Please remember, I'm very much pregnant, and a woman walking alone in a parking lot. If he was really having car trouble, is it likely he would ask a pregnant woman for help rather than two men that just walked past him? Doubtful. At this point, I know it's time to go, so I just say, "Sorry, I can't help you," and kept on walking. A little faster this time. I still see him out of the corner of my eye. I have my keys out and I'm ready to go as soon as I make it into the truck. He's still coming toward me. "You really aren't gonna help me? I just need a jump." Again, I say, "Nope, sorry." I finally get to the truck, unlock it, and jump in. He's practically running towards me now. I lock the doors and try to get the key in the ignition. but I was shaking. And at that moment, the damn key just wouldn't fit into the ignition. He gets to the truck and hits my window, yelling out, "I just need your help for a minute." Now I'm starting to get angry, and I yell out back to him, "No, get the hell away from me." He grabs the door handle and tries to open my door, screaming, "Just open the door." Here's where I lost my cool and made a split-second decision. I have my concealed carry license because there have been other reasons that I needed protection that I'm not going to go into here. However, I did have my .38 special in my console, and I do know how to use it. When he tried to open up my door, my only thought was to protect my child and myself. I rolled the window down, grabbed the .38 and pointed it right at his face. I rolled down the window, grabbed my .38 and pointed it right at his face and said, "I'm not gonna tell you again. Get the f*** away from me." He stood there for a moment, I'm sure in pure shock. In that moment, time seemed to stop. I didn't know what he would do, but I knew I was prepared to use that gun if he made any more movement toward me. He didn't. He didn't say a word. He turned and ran. I know I should have just got the hell out of Dodge, but I couldn't. All I could do was sit there in shock. I was terrified, not only what he may have done to me, had I not felt something was wrong, but also I just had to threaten to kill someone. Not a situation I ever want to be in again. However, should it happen again, I have that .38. It's loaded and ready to go. I hear a lot of scary shopping stories, and they're usually from the perspective of the person who's shopping. However, my scariest experience happened when I was working at a bookstore. About 2 months after I was promoted to bookseller to assistant manager, we were hit by the Christmas rush. It was always so overwhelming, really. By the end of the night, everyone was so wiped out. Getting all the receipts and drawers counted at the end of the night took a lot of time. One of the nights I was closing, I let the workers go home as soon as they were done. There was no reason to make them stick around and be tired while I was finishing up my work. It's especially demoralizing during the holiday season. People are overworked as it is, so making them linger for just a few extra minutes is just torture. Everyone performs better and keeps a better mood when they secure those small victories. After I let everyone go, I went back in the office to do my work. After a while, I heard the doorbell ring. We had security cameras, but there wasn't one at the door. I know this is archaic, as the front door security is 101, but we're a bookstore. We're more concerned with what they take once they're inside. The likelihood of them actually kicking in the door, the place full of books, is pretty low. So I had to go to the front door and see who it was. There was a guy there. He was dressed in dark clothes and had his hood up. I asked how I could help him, of course watching him through the door. "Hey dude, I left my wallet in your store," he told me. "Can you open up the door and let me come in and get it?" I asked him where he thought he left it at, and I would go look for it for him. He didn't like that idea, told me he wasn't sure. He'd been shopping through the entire store and would have to look for it himself. I asked him if he bought anything. He said yes, which meant he had to have had his wallet on him at some point. I pointed that out to him. He seemed taken back a bit. I told him we didn't get anything turned in, but if I could take his information, I'd get back to him if we find anything. The man begins to get angry, telling me he needs his wallet. He needs it tonight. He couldn't wait for me to look for it. He keeps insisting that I let him in so he can look for it. When I told him there's no way I'm letting him in the store, especially this late, and especially while I was alone, he began getting visibly angry. He told me that if I didn't let him in the place right away, he would call the police and tell him I stole his wallet. He even got his cell phone out of his pocket, acted like he was going to call. At this point, I've had enough. I told the guy the best I could do for him is take his information and call him if anything was found. I then told him if that wasn't good enough, there wasn't anything at all I could do else for him. He gets really angry, starts swearing at me, grabbed the door and began shaking it, demanding that I open it. I told him I was going to walk over to the customer service desk and call the police myself. I was no longer willing to cooperate. As I made my way over there, I noticed the guy take off down the street. I thought that was the end of him, and I figured that I didn't really need to bother police for this anymore. I went back to my work and tried my best to get it done so I could go home and get some rest. It took me about 2 hours to honestly finish all of my work. I hadn't heard the doorbell ring. Pretty much figured that I wouldn't be seeing that guy again anyway. However, when I was going to the front of the store, I did look around to see if anyone was in the parking lot before I went outside. I went out to my car in the cold and couldn't wait to get the hell out of the chill. However, I froze when I was maybe within a couple of feet away from my car. There was someone in the back seat of my car. He was hiding, down on the back seat with his hood over his head. There was definitely someone in the back seat of my car, and I knew then exactly who it had to be. Furthermore, he must have seen me, or he wouldn't have ducked down. I did the only thing I could think to do. I turned around and ran full speed back to the store. I didn't look back around until I made it back to the door, and yeah, he was now coming at me. I unlocked the door and shut it behind me. He made it right to the door before I could lock it, so I had to do my best to hold it closed while trying to turn the lock. As I did, a man screamed all sorts of obscenities at me, telling me he's gonna kill me. As the door opened outward, I quickly pushed it toward him, knocking him to the ground. Before he realized what had happened and recovered, I was able to get the door closed and locked. Then I immediately called the police. The guy left after the door was locked, but the police picked him up actually pretty quickly. He was your average nutcase, strung out on drugs and having a mental breakdown of some variety. I personally think he was connected to some kind of criminal life because he had a good story to get into the store. He was able to pop the lock on my sedan. I felt targeted for a while, like he wanted to hurt me specifically, but thankfully, I never saw that guy again. I wanted a PlayStation 4 when it was originally released. I tried everything to get one as quickly as possible. The local Best Buy was having a Black Friday sale. I stood in line, waiting to get one. I was nowhere near lucky enough to actually get one in this method though. I then tried getting one online. And as much as I wanted one, the people on eBay and Amazon who were reselling them were asking way too much, and I just couldn't afford it. After several days of trying my best and finding a way of getting one, I had come to the conclusion that it just wasn't going to happen. It was then I thought I came across a bit of luck. Going through Craigslist, I found out that someone was selling their PlayStation 4 at no more than the original buying price of the system. I, of course, was skeptical. I couldn't understand why they would do that. Also, I figured as in demand as the system happened to be, someone would have claimed it right away. I immediately emailed the seller and let them know that I was very interested and hoped that they still had it. I was surprised to get an immediate response. They did in fact still have the PS4 and were willing to sell it to me. They asked for my address so they could bring it over. I was hesitant. I asked if it would be better to meet in public. I wasn't too keen on the idea of someone coming over to my house. He let me know that he was going to be very busy all day and that he couldn't keep an appointment in public. It would be much better if he came over to my house. I was still really not ecstatic about the idea, but I really wanted that PS4. I agreed and then gave the guy my address. I figured it was safer than me going over to his place. This whole exchange took place about 9 a.m. I was so happy and got really eager to get that PS4. My eagerness only grew as I began waiting for this guy to show up. Hell, I had not only began waiting for him, I waited for a long time. Hours passed by, and I began to think that he wasn't going to come. About 2 p.m., I got really impatient. I tried emailing the guy back, asking him where he was. Previously, I'd gotten very quick responses from him, but this time, I didn't get any. Around 6 p.m., I'd lost all hope. I figured that most likely he got a better offer from someone else and just didn't want to tell me. I was disappointed, more than I can possibly even tell you. I couldn't even tell you how deflated I was. It's one thing to have not gotten the item from the store. I could come to terms with that. But I was so close to having one in my hands, and I didn't get the PS4, and that was the scariest thing that ever happened to me. Just kidding. For the rest of the night, I kept looking around on Craigslist to find a new PS4. It was hopefully within my price range. I wasn't able to find anything like before, and I knew it. I'd wasted the entire day and evening with this search. It was now past midnight, and I had nothing to show for that day. I got ready for bed, and that was when I heard something. At first, I dismissed it, thinking it was my imagination. Then I heard it again. Someone was knocking at my door. I walked up to the door and looked out the window. There's a guy standing out there. I asked who he was. He identified himself as the guy who had the PS4. He apologized for being so late, told me he got caught up during the day. He then asked if I had the money. I opened up my door but kept the screen door closed. I told him I had the money, but I didn't see that he had anything with him. I asked if he brought the PS4 with him. He then told me it was out in his van. He told me to get the money and come out to the van with him, and he would get it for me. I let him know that I wasn't really comfortable walking out to his van, and he then told me, "Oh, that's all right." I looked over his shoulder. I saw that someone was in the van waiting, and he'd been keeping his hands in his hooded sweatshirt all the time he was talking to me. There's something more than just his hand in there. I told him I'd go get my wallet and then come back. He protested as I closed the door in his face and then locked it. I was too uncomfortable with this. I went over to the phone to call the cops. As I did, I heard this loud hit on my front door. Then after a few moments, I watched the van drive really fast away. When I went to check and see if he damaged the door, I nearly fainted as I saw a knife embedded into the door itself. I was right. He definitely did have something in his sweatshirt, and I'm glad I didn't go out to the van with him. This was unbeknownst to me at the time, during the height of the Craigslist killer craze. Normally, I don't go out Christmas shopping on Black Friday. I know there's deals to be gotten, but the actual amount of people who get them is pretty low. It sometimes seems that more negativity comes out of it more than anything else. I did go out on Black Friday once, and honestly, the experience kept me from ever even considering doing it ever again. This was a few years back. The big Christmas gift that year was a game called Uno Attack. It was supposed to sell out pretty quickly. My nephew really wanted one, so I decided for the first time ever to brave the Black Friday crowd and see about getting one. I waited outside the store in line for it to open. The entire time, I kept wondering why people were so fanatical about this. It was cold, and although I was reasonably bundled up, it didn't help that I had to spend so much time not moving. In addition, people were in terrible spirits, which seems to take the spirit away from the event itself. Some people would try to cut in line, which only made people already in line crabbier than they were. When the store was getting closer to opening, I noticed that there was someone from the store headed out and talking to each person in line. When they got to me, I realized that he was handing out tickets, indicating who would be able to buy Uno Attack. He asked me if that was why I was there, and I told him yes. He told me I'm lucky, because I was getting the very last ticket. Of course, this caused some groaning and swearing from people behind me. Although I hated the idea that there would be a lot of children who wouldn't be getting the toy they wanted, I personally was elated. That was until this guy got out of line and walked up to me. He came up immediately after that worker left. He first offered to buy the ticket from me. I told him no, because it wasn't a matter of money. It was me trying to make my nephew happy. He then started telling me that his son really wanted that toy. I countered, letting him know that my nephew also really wanted that toy. When I kept refusing, he started telling me other stories, such as his son was really sick. but I could tell he was just doing his best to make me feel guilty. From further back in the line, a few other people began telling the guy to leave me alone. He got into a shouting match with several of them. Eventually, the guy stomped away, but not before telling me that I'll get that toy. I tried to not think about it. I went in, claimed the Uno game, and did some more shopping. I figured that since I'd spent so much time outside, I should try to get as much done as I could. When I was done in the store, I went back out to my car. I put all the toys in the trunk and then walked over to the bookstore in the strip mall in order to get some other items. When I began walking back to the car a second time, I paused when I noticed the man from earlier was leaning on my car now. I began feeling tense, knowing this guy was going to confront me again. He was much bigger than I, but I decided I couldn't let him intimidate me. As I got closer to my car, he noticed and smiled. He reached into his pocket, and I assumed he was reaching for his wallet. But it only took a moment before I saw that it was a pocket knife, and he flipped it open. I immediately stopped. I couldn't imagine this guy would be stupid enough to try and threaten or stab me in a busy parking lot. But I also didn't want to test that theory. I quickly turned around and ran back into the store that I bought that Uno game in. I let the store security know what happened, and they quickly gave me an escort out to my car. The man was gone, but I was still shaken. I was more shaken when I noticed the knife marks on the lock for my trunk, and now my trunk was also dented. There were also deep scratches in my driver's side window. For obvious reasons, I never went out Black Friday shopping again. I'm an elementary school teacher. Winter break just started. I'm feeling super joyful. But before break, some of the kids were talking about their presents and Santa. It got me thinking about when I stopped believing in Santa, which is the story that I'm going to share with you all, because when it comes to finding out about Santa Claus and that he isn't real, I had a pretty uniquely terrifying experience. I loved Christmas. I mean, I still do. But as a child, I absolutely could not sleep on Christmas Eve. I tried to spy Santa a million times. I'd wait for my parents to go to bed, try to sneak out. They'd catch me every single time. Except one year. I was in second grade, so probably like 6 or 7 years old. I recall my best friend at school saying something like pretend to be asleep. Then my parents will go to sleep faster, so sneaking out to meet Santa would be easier. Perfect. So Christmas Eve shows up. I'm riddled with angst, and I remember my friend's advice. Pretend to be asleep. And that's what I did. Before Christmas Story was even over, I started to act sleepy. I don't know how great my acting skills were, but it was good enough to where my dad said he should just take me up to bed. I obliged and allowed myself to be carried. When my dad left the room, I think I waited just a few moments before getting out of bed and sitting next to the door. I was listening for all the key indicators that the house was sleeping. What I remember most is how long it took. Forever. I actually dozed off, and when I woke up, the house noises had subsided. I figured my parents had been in their room for long enough, and decided now I'm gonna make my move. Opening my door with such grace, I slid out of the doorway and started my way up to the living room, a combo of tiptoeing and sliding, until eventually I reached our couch. I dove into the couch, lifted the curtains, and then sat wrapped up in a blanket, peering out the window for Santa. It was snowing, and I could have sworn that I heard sleigh bells, but I wasn't seeing anyone. I had a gut-wrenching thought. Maybe he had already come. I squirmed out of the blanket and curtains, looked at the tree and stockings, and phew, he hadn't arrived yet. As I maneuvered back under the curtains, I'm shocked. I see the man himself, Santa. He's walking though, no sleigh and no reindeer. But I'm not picky, it's Santa. I realize he's gonna pass right by my house, but he's looking all over the place, at all the houses and all the windows. What's he looking for? I think to myself. Then he stops in his tracks, gives another look around at all the houses before his eyes land on me. He sees me. I'm ecstatic. I start waving excitedly, trying so hard not to squeal. He waves back, and then looks around before he starts walking toward my window. As he approaches, I notice that he's got a bag with him, and I assume it's full of presents. He mouths or whispers the phrase, "Do you want to come say hi to Santa, sweetie?" I shake my head yes. He points to the front door. I leave the window and walk over to the door, where there's another long window that reaches the floor. I watch as Santa tries to open up the door, but it's locked. I reach for the lock, unlocking the door, and he tries again. From the other side of the door, I hear him say, "Okay, sweetie, you just gotta unlock that other lock, the one on the doorknob." So I try to do what he's telling me, but for some reason I can't quite grip the lock. My little fingers keep slipping. Santa then tells me it's okay, just go to the back door. Brilliant. I scoot over to the back door and I wait for Santa. He rounds the corner and the light from the back deck turns on. Santa is fully illuminated. And I remember thinking, wow, Santa is a lot younger than I thought he was. Skinnier too. The lights seemed to scare him. He almost ran away until he saw me standing there. Then he proceeded to hustle towards the door. He was telling me and motioning me that I need to be quick. He said he had something special for me, but he had to then go. He leaned down and was reaching for something inside his bag. I unlocked the sliding glass door. I push my hands against the glass and start to push the door by walking my body in the direction I needed to open it. I'll note that even today, this door is hard to open or close if it's at the wrong angle. But at 6 or 7, it's nearly impossible. Just as he turned around, I heard the door start to give way, and as soon as it had, the home was filled with this awful sound of alarms. I took my hands away from the door and plugged my ears, and I looked at Santa. He now looked panicked. I noticed he was now holding some sort of rope in one hand and a bag in the other. He drops the bag and reaches for the sliding door. He slides it open no problem. He then reaches for me. But before I can reach back or move or do anything, I'm swept up by my mother. My dad kicks Santa square in the chest, knocking him back several feet, landing him on his backside. That's all I saw before my mom rushed me back to their bedroom and locked the door. My mom tells me that I didn't even cry at that point, which makes sense. I don't remember crying or even being terribly upset. Not until later. It was when my parents explained that the man who came to our house wasn't Santa. My dad kept saying things like, "She still thinks he's real. Of course she tried to let the guy in." Then I did start crying. That was all while the police were there. What happened to the guy? He got away-ish. The guy took off once he gained footing, and my dad didn't bother chasing him because he'd gotten the guy's wallet. The cops were on the phone and the guy left his bag behind. That bag wasn't filled with presents. My dad told me that it was filled with more rope like the kind the man had been holding. There was duct tape, candy, miscellaneous tools like a hammer, a lot of plastic bags, and random clothes. Yeah, it's horrifying. But luckily, he was picked up just a few minutes after he left our house. Pretty hard not to spot the guy running around town dressed up like Santa Claus. In the end, I did forgive my parents for ruining the magic that is believing in Santa because, you know, they did save my life. Hey everyone, thanks for listening if you stuck around to this point. If you haven't yet, please hit the like button, the subscribe button, and that notification bell to be notified when future episodes come out. If you have a true scary story of your own, feel free to send it to my email or post it to my subreddit. You can stalk me on Twitter, you can stalk me on Facebook, and you can also stalk me on Instagram. All these links are below. What's going on, guys? I hope you are having a fantastic night. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Just FYI, I'm sure there's people already complaining to themselves or gonna say it, but 2 of these stories I know I've done before, but they were in the very first or second Christmas Stories volume that I did over 2 years ago. and I went back and listened to them, and they were hot garbage. So I feel like they needed a redemption and done again, and at least sounding better. So hopefully that didn't irritate you too much. The rest of them were new, at least new to my channel, and I hope you enjoyed those as well. I apologize, didn't get another episode out last week. I know I made all the promises and stuff, but we're getting renovations done in our house, and they are here all day long until like evening, and I'm way more productive in the morning, and so my routine is completely thrown off right now, and it is extremely hard for me to record at night, but I'm doing it here. So this week and next week, the recording episodes, still will be 2 episodes out both weeks, but it's going to be up in the air when they'll come out, because I'm just going to record when I get the opportunity to, and some nights are better than the others, and it's a shit show right now, but it's going to look fantastic once it's finally done. But right now the routine is completely thrown off, and I can't record or do anything during the day because obviously they're here, it's loud, whatever. But yeah, once, I guess pretty much, you know, new year, new me, new channel, new booze. After we get that stuff done, that won't be an issue anymore, but yeah, here we are. Regardless, next episode will be hunting stories, and then I got more Christmas stories, I got winter driving stories, I got, I can't remember what the other topics were for the rest of the week, but I think another Christmas episode for sure. And yeah, and then New Year's episode or topic, whatever you want to call it. I'm tired. All right, I love you all very much, and I will see you in the next episode, okay? Until then, keep it frosty, shake it, don't bake it, shake and bake, live, love, laugh, do all those good things. Okay? I don't know what I'm saying. I love y'all. Cheers.